Okay, this week we are moving into a period in Egyptian history called the early dynastic period. And hopefully you've watched the little intro to this particular period. And what I want to do is continue with looking at specific objects and what they can tell us about Egyptian history. So this week we're going to look at something called the Narmer Palette, dates to 3100 to 3000 BC. Okay, so in terms of the early dynastic period, you can tell by the word dynastic that this is a period when we start finding kings or rulers in ancient Egypt, which of course indicates the growth of political power. Now, we've looked at the Naqada period, and I showed you a few of the earlier burial sites. So we know that the idea of a kingship did not just appear in the early dynastic period. It was formed or was beginning to form in the Naqada period. And we don't know the exact dates, but between 3200 and 3000 BC, we've got something called Dynasty Zero. Now it's called Dynasty Zero because in the beginning, archaeologists named the first dynasty 1, and then they realized there were earlier kings. So now we have a Dynasty Zero. Now there's a bunch of names here. We don't know exactly who the first king or pharaoh was in ancient Egypt. It's, Aha, there's a king scorpion, Narmer, who I'll talk about. But they are the kings that started to bring the north and south, so the upper Egypt with the south and lower Egypt, the north, together as one single country. And then around 3000 BC, you have the first dynasty. And this is when you find the real unification of Egypt. So we've got a capital of the country, and then as this progresses, you see royal tombs getting bigger and bigger, and then you see the first known examples of writing. Okay, so I just talked a little bit about this. Who was the first king or pharaoh? We don't actually know. It's been suggested the name of Narmer, who we'll look at, Scorpion, who we'll look at today, Aha, Menes. We're not sure. So just be aware as you're looking through the scholarship, there's going to be various people saying different things. And so we're not quite sure who the earliest one is. So our object today is the Narmer Palette. It's this fascinating piece of stone, and it's from Hierarchanopolis, the town that we've been talking about quite a bit. It's a little over 2 feet tall. And what you're looking at is the front and the back. So let me see if I can write on this. So this is the front, and then this is the back. Now, this wasn't found where Narmer was buried. His tomb is in a town called Abydos. Now, let me go through some of this. So first thing you might notice is that there's something called registers, where it's almost like a comic book where there's little boxes and it's telling you what's going on. So on the front side, you've got 3 registers. So here's 1, here's 2, and there's a little subdivision here. And then there's 3. And then on the back side, you've got this register here. You've got register here, and so there's 4 areas, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the back. Now each one of these will tell a story. So at the top here, you've got the goddess Bat, or in some cases, scholarship thinks this is the goddess Hathor. And you've got this little box here called the Seraph. Now I'm going to move my slides forward with a close-up of the Seraph. So this is something I showed in the very first slide. What a Seraph is it's a representation of a house, and who lives in the house or the palace? The king. So this is the name of Narmer. He's symbolized by the catfish and a hand axe or a chisel. And you'll see his symbol in lots of different places. Now getting back to this, so the goddess is looking over the scene. Now what you see is a man standing here. Notice how tall he is. So he's the tallest figure in here. In Egyptian iconography, that always represents the pharaoh. Now you can see he's holding a mace and is about to smack this guy in the head. Now who are these people? Well, this is, as I put on the slide here, he's wearing a crown. And this is the white crown of Upper Egypt, so the lower part of Egypt. Now this guy that he's hitting if you look at a close-up of this, and you can find pictures of the Narmer Palette all over, it looks very different than the standard Egyptian. It's possible that this is a representation of somebody coming from outside of Egypt and ruling. But if you look on top of where he's sitting, you have a row of papyrus. And this is the symbol of Lower Egypt, so the northern Egypt. So, and then you've got the god Horus, the eagle. And what you can see here is Horus has this little hook that's holding on to this guy. And so this is probably representing Pharaoh Narmer, or King Narmer, taking control of Lower Egypt, or the northern part of Egypt. And then down in the lower register, you can see these people being trampled on, literally by the king. So he's taken control of them. And if you look on the backside, you can see Hathor, or Bat, at the top. You've got the Seraph. And then you've got this scene here. Now let me go to the next slide and I'll show you a close-up of this scene. So this is the scene from the Narmer Palette. Now notice here, you've got the pharaoh wearing two crowns now, representing that he has unified the country more than likely. And you can see his Seraph here. It's the catfish and the chisel. Now look down here. So again, Narmer is the tallest. This character here is shorter than Narmer, but taller than these other figures. So it's assumed that this is probably the son of Narmer, will be the next pharaoh. And then let's keep moving down. So you have this really interesting register here, where these two characters have this sort of mythical animal, and you can see that their necks are intertwined here. It's thought that this is sort of a symbolic showing of the joining of the North and South, and these two characters are holding the necks of these mythical animals, showing it's probably a struggle to control the North and South. And then down at the bottom, you have an iconic representation of the pharaoh, who's a bull in this case, and breaking down into the city, probably into the north. So that's the Narmer Palette. So it can actually tell us quite a bit about royal power and the joining of North and South by a single ruler. Now this is another mace head, or not another one, it's a mace head. So a mace is a sort of a roundish object. You probably can't see it very well on the left hand, but on the right, this is the close-up of this area here on the mace head. So what you see here is a person standing, and in just a second, I will show you a close-up or a drawing of this. What I do want to point out here is this is an image of a scorpion. And above that, you've got an image of a rosette of a flower. Now, it's thought, and we know this from the Second Dynasty, that the image of a scorpion is royal power. And we also know from other iconography that the rosette is symbol of royal power as well. And so this figure is normally called Scorpion King, or the Scorpion Rosette King. Now, what this king is doing, now this is a drawing of the mace head, and you can see registers again. What this king is doing, the Scorpion King or Scorpion Rosette King, is he has a little tool in his hand, and he's digging a canal. And so what this guy is doing here is he's got a basket, probably carrying the dirt or the mud from the canal. So it looks like part of what the royal kings did is build canals, and that makes sense because the more canals you have, the more you can farm, the more wealth you would have. This is another palette called the Hierarchanopolis Pallet. And what you can see here is it's a symbol of hunting, symbol of sometimes royal power, but certainly hunting. You can see lions going after deer. And then on the back, you can see sort of these mythical creatures again. Now, one thing to note here, and this is the back side of the palette. So what I should have pointed out in the Narmer palette is this round circular area. It's not that maybe this is where you would mix makeup, like a palette makeup. It's not clear, but a lot of these palettes have the same type of little circle in the center. So we're talking about the early dynastic period where you start to have kings. Now I have a list here, and I will put this up on our Blackboard course, so these are live links, where you can look at each of these tombs of these very early kings. If you went to the talk the other day, you know that many of these early burial sites of the kings or pharaohs have what's called subsidiary tombs. And these are tombs of retainers or advisors or people who are high up in the government who are buried next to their king. It's thought that a lot of these early ones were probably sacrificed or they committed suicide at the death of the pharaoh. And just so a little bit of detail, Ahaz, one of the earlier kings, he had 33 males and 7 lions that were buried alongside of him in these subsidiary tombs. We do know that if this is really human sacrifice, it stopped. They stopped doing that, mostly because it is a strain on resources, a strain on knowledge, if all the retainers are killed when the pharaoh dies. But the idea is that the pharaoh is going into the afterlife and taking all of these people with him. Now, this is an overview of some of the tomb setups. So you can see the names here, like Aha, the one I just talked about. You've got Narmer, and then all these others. And I'll show you a better slide here, but this is how they were buried and what you're looking at. Let me just show you the next. I think it's a little clearer here. So these are the same tombs. Narmer and Aha are off to the side here. But you've got like the tomb of Jer, who I'll talk about in a next lecture. This is where the king was buried, and these are all the subsidiary burials, all around here. And if you look at all of these, you can see the main tomb, which is mostly in a darker color, and then subsidiary tombs around the pharaoh. So this, as you know, becomes, or you may not know, becomes fairly common for administrators and queens and children of the pharaohs or the royal families to be buried by the pharaoh, and especially the case when we get to looking at the pyramids. So I talked to you about King Aha already and all of the subsidiary tombs, but that's what these are. You've got the pharaoh in here, and then you've got these storerooms where jars and various things are put in these tombs. And then here's an image of what these tombs look like in a row, actually, as they were excavated. So what can the Narmer Palette tell us about this particular time? Well, it can tell us a huge amount. So what you're looking at is the development of an organized government. So one thing I didn't point out on the Narmer Palette is if you look on the back side to the right, there's a whole row of bodies that have their head removed, and their head is between their feet. It's a war scene. So no big surprise, because we're talking about the coming together of the North and South. Because it's an organized government, you've got the rise of political power. And again, it didn't just show up in the early dynastic period. It was certainly being developed in the pre-dynastic period. Now from that, think about political power in a government. You have to have an organized economy because you have to collect taxes. And because you have an army, we know that there is some type of organized labor, organized military. And then we can extract from that a little bit further. Because you have an organized economy, you must have organized agriculture, meaning there are farmers out there that are growing food, they grow excess, it's stored by the new government, who then pays people for work. I talked a little bit about, in a previous lecture, about some of the material in these tombs, and it certainly indicates trade. And we know that trade was happening fairly early on in Egyptian history, but the Narmer Palette can lead us to these ideas. And of course, you also have religion with these tombs that I showed you. So the Narmer Palette can tell us quite a bit about what is happening in the early dynastic period.